It was a rainy evening in New York City, the kind of night when the streets glistened like glass and the scent of wet asphalt filled the air. Inside the luxurious Hamilton Hotel, the annual charity gala had just begun. Expensive perfumes mingled with the soft notes of live jazz, as men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns filled the marble hall. Among them was Alexander Ward, a billionaire investor whose name commanded respect wherever he went. Tall, confident, and sharp-tongued, he believed money could buy anything except humility. Not far from the champagne tables, a young woman stood quietly, holding a tray of glasses. Her name was Clara Evans. She was one of the cleaning staff, invisible to most of the people in that room. Her hair was neatly tied back, her uniform freshly pressed, and yet her eyes carried a hidden spark, a dream she had never spoken aloud. Clara had always loved designing dresses. As a child, she stitched clothes for dolls using scraps from her mother's old garments. But when her parents died and debts followed, she left school and started working to survive. Every night after her shift, she would sit by the window in her tiny rented room, sketching gowns by candlelight, imagining the day one of her designs would walk down a runway. That evening, as she refilled glasses, her attention was caught by a mannequin in the center of the ballroom. Draped on it was a crimson evening gown, the highlight of the gala's charity auction. It shimmered like liquid fire under the chandeliers. Clara's breath caught in her chest. She whispered softly, "Someday I'll make something even more beautiful." Alexander, passing by with a glass of wine, overheard her. He turned, amused. "You?" he said with a smirk. "You think you could design something like that?" Clara lowered her eyes. "I just said someday, sir." The guests nearby chuckled. Alexander's grin widened. "Tell you what," he said loudly, ensuring everyone heard him. "If you can wear a dress like that and look half as good as the models here, I'll marry you." Laughter erupted around them. Clara stood frozen, her cheeks burning. She didn't reply. She simply turned away, holding back tears. To everyone else, it was a harmless joke. But for Clara, it was a wound. That night, when the party ended and the guests were gone, Clara stayed behind to clean the glittering mess. As she swept the marble floors, she stared again at the red dress. She imagined herself not as a maid, but as a designer, the woman who could create beauty from nothing. In that quiet hall, surrounded by empty glasses and fading music, she made a silent promise. One day, she would build a life so grand that no one would ever mock her again. The days that followed were hard. Clara worked 2 jobs, cleaned houses by day, and sewed in a small workshop at night. Her fingers bled from the needle. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, but her spirit refused to break. She took online design courses on an old phone, using free Wi-Fi from a cafe. She watched fashion shows, studied fabrics, and practiced sketching for hours. Every failure, every insult became fuel for her determination. One afternoon, while working at the hotel, she overheard 2 event planners talking. A new fashion brand was looking for assistants, unpaid interns, but it was a start. Clara applied the next day using a handmade portfolio. When the manager saw her sketches, he was surprised by her raw talent. "You've never studied fashion?" he asked. "No," she replied, "just life." He smiled and gave her a chance. Months passed. Clara worked silently, observing every detail. How fabrics moved, how lights changed colors, how confidence transformed an ordinary person into someone unforgettable. At night, she continued designing. She saved every penny, often skipping meals to buy fabric. 1 year later, a small fashion show opened in Brooklyn, giving new designers a chance to showcase their work. Clara submitted her name and was accepted. She spent weeks preparing her first collection, she called it. Rise, inspired by her own journey. The night of the show, the backstage was chaos. Makeup artists rushing, models changing, lights flashing. Clara stood in the corner, her hands trembling, watching the audience fill the seats. Among them, by coincidence, sat Alexander Ward. He had come to see a friend's brand, unaware of who else was showing that night. When the announcer introduced, "Clara Evans, debut designer," Alexander's jaw tightened. He remembered the maid from the gala, though he could hardly believe it was the same person. She stepped onto the stage to thank the audience. dressed in a stunning white jumpsuit of her own creation. Elegant, confident, radiant. The crowd applauded. Then her models walked out one by one, in breathtaking gowns that seemed to capture both struggle and triumph. Every stitch told her story. Alexander couldn't look away. When the show ended, people stood up, clapping loudly. Reporters swarmed around Clara, calling her the new voice of hope in fashion. Afterward, Alexander approached her backstage. "Clara," he began, his tone uncertain, "I can't believe how far you've come." "You look," she smiled politely, like someone who finally believed in herself. He hesitated. "I meant what I said that night, you know. If you ever wanted—" Clara interrupted gently. "That night taught me something important. I don't need anyone to validate my worth. I needed to believe in me. And I do now." She turned to help a model with her dress, leaving him standing there, silent, humbled and utterly speechless. In the weeks that followed, Clara's designs went viral. A famous magazine featured her under the headline, "From Maid to Masterpiece." Fashion houses reached out with offers, but she built her own label instead, Evans Couture. Her brand became a symbol of perseverance and dignity. She hired women from low-income backgrounds, giving them the same chance she never had. Years later, at another grand gala, the same hotel where everything had begun, Clara returned as a guest of honor. Cameras flashed as she entered in a flowing red gown, her signature design. The crowd parted in awe. Alexander was there too, older now, watching from a distance. Their eyes met briefly. She smiled kindly, not with pride, but with peace. She had forgiven him long ago. When she stepped on the stage to speak, the room fell silent. "Once," she said softly, "I was invisible in this very hall. Tonight I stand here not because I was lucky, but because I refuse to stop believing. Don't let anyone tell you who you are. Prove it through what you become." The audience rose in applause. Alexander lowered his gaze, unable to speak. The woman he once mocked had become everything he could never be. Strong, kind and untouchable. And as the music swelled and the lights reflected off her red gown, Clara Evans smiled, not at the applause, not at her success, but at the promise she had, once made to herself on a lonely night with a broom in her hand, that she would rise, and she did.